Hi, everyone. Welcome on in. I'm Natalie Neubauer. I'm the speaker coordinator for the IHS IPE Research Seminar Series. Thank you for joining us today for today's talk called State of the Science, Generation Z, and the Transition to Nursing Practice. We're very happy to have Kristi Stinson with us today. Dr. Stinson is an associate professor and chair of the undergraduate nursing department at Seton Hall. This is her 9th year at the university, and she examines Generation Z and their learning characteristics. We're very excited today to hear about the research that she has been doing on Generation Z. Nursing educators, as well as educators from all health professions, are asked to prepare their students to transition to the workforce and practice safely. And in order to do so, we really need to understand the different learning styles and the different distinctive characteristics of those who are in Generation Z, and those are those born in 1995, ending around 2012. As their birth year. We must know and understand, as I said, the types of learners, how they think, interact, and socialize, and that about 24% of the US population is Generation Z. So these are a lot of the students that are coming through our programs. So the purpose of today's presentation is to examine the research related to Generation Z and prepare for this transition, particularly of nursing students into practice. However, this can also be applied across all of the health professions. And it's particularly even more important now that we're in the global pandemic. I will pass this over to Dr. Stinson in a second. Just a couple of reminders to keep your microphones muted during the presentation. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to leave some time at the end to answer those. So without any further delay, Dr. Stinson, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. It's actually kind of interesting that we're doing this virtually, and Natalie and I were just talking about how that just seems to be the way that we've obviously been in for the last 18, 20 months. And this virtual format actually ties directly to my topic for today, which is the learning characteristics of Generation Z students, particularly Generation Z nursing students. What led me to this topic is about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to a university-wide meeting, and there was a guest speaker on Generation Z. And even though those are the students that have, are in all of our classrooms right now, just hearing some of the characteristics about them, I left pretty astounded. Again, even though we know these students from our classrooms, I know I didn't truly understand and know these students. So I wanted to dig deeper so I could not only tailor my teaching to best meet their needs, but I just think as nursing faculty, as well as healthcare professionals in general, this is even more important that we connect with our students in that we have to not only educate them, but help them to be ready to safely transition into healthcare practice. So truly understanding these types of students is even more important for us. So let me just pull up my slides. Okay, so as Natalie said, today's topic is going to be the state of the science, Generation Z nursing students, and their safe transition into nursing practice. Again, this is not just nursing students as transitions to any healthcare student, but in order to try to help them to transition to the workforce and to be safe and effective and efficient healthcare practitioners, as faculty, we really need to first know and understand these types of student learners. So we really have to look at who are the types of students that are in our classrooms, how they think, how they learn, how they interact, and how they socialize. And that takes us to its Generation Z. Who is Generation Z? There's many names that are used for this generation, Gen Z being the most prominent. They're iGen, pluralist generation, Zers, digital natives, Zoomers, NetGen, Gen Tech, Post-Gen. There's lots and lots of names for this Generation Z. Generation Z are those that were born starting in 1995 and ending somewhere around 2012. The literature varies on that end date a little bit. Some sources say 2009, 2010. Most seem to go up to 2012, but that start date's pretty significant. That 1995 seems to be the globally accepted start date for this Generation Z. And that's not arbitrary. It's actually in that it really aligns with the time that the internet, the World Wide Web, became publicly available, started. So the start of this generation and their overall learning characteristics closely align with the internet. This generation has never known a time without the internet. As Natalie said, to start, Gen Z is approximately 24% of the current US population, about 72.8 million globally fall into this Generation Z group. And here's the thing that we really need to think about as educators. This group's going to comprise about 20% of the workforce in the next 4 years. So 1/5 of our nurses, 1/5 of our PAs, 1/5 of our doctors are going to be from this Generation Z. So it's critical for us as educators to think about in terms of overall healthcare, safety in healthcare, and how we as educators are going to adequately prepare this large group for entry into practice. So what we really need to think about is their learning attributes. Generation Z has distinctive characteristics and learning styles that faculty must know and embrace in order to prepare these future healthcare professionals. And again, given that the current healthcare climate of this global pandemic, this is even more important. Our charge as educators is even more vital as we're launching our students into healthcare during this pandemic. We really need to make sure that we understand how they best learn in order to ensure that they're going to be safe practitioners. So here are some of the most prominent learning attributes that the literature supports for this Generation Z. Some of them aren't really surprising. You know, spend a few classes with this generation and, you know, spend some time in the classroom and you'll see these, but a few of them, I think trying to keep them all in mind is really the overall takeaway message. So obviously, this Generation Z is technology driven and multitasking. Multitasking in the terms that they're this rapidly changing technology. They're high consumers, high cravers of the digital world. They've never known a world without technology. They've never known a world without the internet. They've never known a world without Google, being able to quickly look something up. Therefore, they've only learned and really been taught through technology-driven means. They're stuck to digital communication, which kind of leads to the next characteristic, that underdeveloped social skills. The literature says they spend approximately 9 hours a day on their phones alone. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second because that still kind of shocks me. 9 hours a day on their smartphones alone. They're sleeping about 8 hours a day, 16 hours awake, more than half of it, they are on their phones. And again, that's pretty challenging for educators because you don't want them on their phones while we're trying to teach them how to keep their patients alive, right? So they often don't even realize that their phone is in their hand or they're even looking at their phones. Their heads are down, the phones are in their hand, they don't know any other way. And this is really led right to that undeveloped social skills, underdeveloped social and relationship skills. This dependence on technology has led to an underdevelopment of these skills. These learners, these Gen Z learners, are more likely to spend time on their computers than interacting with their peers. They're more likely to communicate through text, through Snapchat, through instant messaging, than actually picking up the phone and calling someone. And this has led to very high increased levels of isolation, anxiety, insecurity, depression, and other health and other mental health concerns. They don't know how to socialize. And this isolation of living in their digital world has led to an abundance of mental health concerns. Layer the pandemic over that, it's a perfect storm for this generation to have anxiety, depression, to name a few. They have a lack of an attention span as they're so accustomed to constant stimulation from this technology. Gen Z has demonstrated very short attention spans. It's noted to be 8 seconds. Their average attention span is 8 seconds. This is 4 seconds less than millennials, as the research supports. So Gen Z, they want to and expect to be invited in quickly. Because their attention span is so short, they best learn through bite-sized content that's delivered in bite-sized pieces. It needs to be broken up as much as possible. The traditional standing, lecturing, PowerPoints with, the most vital things listed on it isn't going to work for this generation. They prefer visuals. They prefer hands-on, interactive learning modalities. They need constant stimulation to keep their attention. These Gen Zs are pragmatic and intensely practical. Gen Z wants to be told what they need to know, and they want to be told quickly, and that alone. They want to know the bottom line immediately. How is this course information relevant? Is it on the test? How does the lecture material relate to the working world? Think about it. They've grown up in a time of public violence. This entire generation was born post 9/11, right? There's a lot of economic uncertainty. This has led them to be pragmatic, cautious, concerned, anxious. Gen Z would rather post a message on social media about some sort of event they heard rather than actively going to participate in it. So we have to kind of keep this pragmatic approach in mind with our learning modalities. This one I think is really no surprise, especially for healthcare students, nursing students particularly. They're highly competitive, highly driven. They don't want to just pass the course, they want to get the A. We have often office hours. The typical Gen Z student that's going to come see you on their own without being told to come see you is the one that missed 1 or 2 questions on the exam. They'll make the appointment to see you in order to see what were those 2 questions that they got wrong. They're very, very competitive and driven, which really almost works against their lack of attention span. So it keep that highly competitive side with that lack of attention span can often make learning difficult and connecting with the entire class difficult. And they're individualistic. The majority of Gen Z college students believe, this I found very interesting. This is from a couple of studies that I read. The majority of our Gen Z college students, 72%, believe they should be able to have a say in how the course of study is delivered. They want to tell you how to design your course, how you deliver the course material. 72%, that's predominance of your class is sitting there thinking, you know what, I really would like to tell my faculty member how they should best deliver that content. So the nursing faculty may need to be, well, faculty in general may need to be flexible with their course material, with their curriculum planning. And this can be pretty difficult when we're trying to educate future healthcare professionals, especially nursing students who have to take that NCLEX after they graduate. There's very specific things that we need to deliver to these students. And so it's often difficult to connect with the individualistic side of these Gen Z students. And there's a lot of generational differences of this Gen Z students from faculty. Majority of nursing faculty in general are older, likely to be the baby boomer generation. The average age of nursing professors is 61.6 years old. So about 62 years old is the average age of our nursing faculty. These Gen Z students, 18, 20, 22 years old. So there's a lot of generational differences and in our students to the faculty, and therefore how the education. And this we have to really keep this in mind too when we're creating our curriculums and our lectures, the generational differences and that individualistic approach of the Gen Zers. So how are we going to educate these students? How are we going to get them ready to practice? We really need to keep these learning attributes in mind as we prepare this generation of future healthcare practitioners for entry into practice. One big thing is safety, right? We have to think of safety. Safety is always at the forefront of our healthcare education, and we need to keep that in consideration while thinking about these learning attributes of this Generation Z in order to make them safe practitioners. I always say to my students, I'm standing under my little safety umbrella. Try to connect them that safety has to be the overriding factor but also keeping in mind how we're going to engage these Gen Z students. How are we going to keep them focused on the material? So there's some suggested things that the literature proposes in order to try to help best connect with these type of Gen Z learners. So first and foremost, especially in consideration with this safety and trying to keep the students engaged, encourage them to be phone free as much as possible. Back to what I just said, remember, average Gen Zer is on their phone 9 hours a day. Well, if they're in your classroom for your lab, your clinical for 2, 3, 4, 6 hours, them being without their phones for that long a period of time is going to make them even more anxious than they already are. But there, you will see better results in the long run. We started in our lab a few semesters ago in one of our lab-based courses, a phone-free policy. Students don't like it at first, but over time they get used to it. And we saw that the grades went up, the connecting to the material went up, the return demonstration on the skills was much more connected. So just trying to be phone free as much as possible, whether it's in the lab, clinical, lecture. We even have a little bin that we have them put the phones in. So they're truly not disconnected with that phone. It can make a big difference. Quickly, they'll even quickly realize how much more learning will occur when the phones are out of the picture. Try to use some mixed methods. I know a lot of us are, do that anyway, but making it more of a mixed method approach in your teaching versus the traditional lecture, traditional question and answer. Really try to flip it up as much as possible. Mix up the lectures for these Gen Zers to keep them engaged in their learning. So use multiple innovative type of teaching modalities across platforms. Try lecturing with audience response clickers. Start it off with the game. Gen Z is not going to go to the textbook to get the answer, to look at the research, or to try to learn something. Remember, this is the technology reliant generation. So try to bring technology in as much as you can into your teaching and your learning. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Google. Remember, these learners have never been without these internet services. This is their go-to way of learning. We're tasked with delivering evidence-based practice guidelines. Well, you might not get a lot of evidence-based practice guidelines on Facebook, but if you can, or Instagram, if you can connect with them through these modalities and then bring them to where the evidence is, just meeting them where they are, and this is their go-to modalities and how they learn. They're so deeply embedded in social media. You'll find they're going to connect to the material much more readily. Here's some other examples of great electronic gaming modalities, electronic simulations. Kahoot, EHR Go, which is electronic health record. I know we've been using that across the IHS campus. Virtual simulation, Shadow Health is an example of one that we use in the College of Nursing. While the Gen Z prefers more hands-on learning that they get in lab and in clinicals, we can keep in mind when we're using visual technology that appeals to these learners. The virtual simulation, virtual gaming is another hands-on approach, but in smaller time frames. That's going to allow it for their shorter attention spans. You can do a 3-4 question Kahoot to start a new topic. You can go to a specific part of the medical record in EHR Go when you're teaching content about MIs. It's a real safe way to connect with these learners and try to engage these learners at the virtual bedside. Another nice thing to try is to tie in some real life examples to these learners. Maybe use a guest speaker in your teaching, clinicians who are working clinically. These Gen Zs want to know what it's going to be like in the real world. So you can bring in some guest speakers to break up your own lecture, your own teaching. We, in one of our courses in the College of Nursing, we have, as a standing every semester in this one particular course, we have the nurse manager of the one and only burn unit in the state of New Jersey come and guest lecture to the students on burn care. It's the highlight of the semester for these students. They need to hear from clinical experts This particular guest lecturer breaks up the material, shows them bits and pieces, uses different modalities to deliver it. It's a really effective way to connect with these Gen Zs and really engage them in their learning. So what's important to these Gen Z nurses, as I kind of just alluded to, you want to spark their interest early. There's actually some research out there that says we want to get to these Gen Zers even before we see them in college, and maybe gauge their interest while they're still in high school. This helps to show that we're meeting them where they are, that we're coming to them in their learning. And really, if we can kind of engage them even earlier, sparking their interest early. These Gen Z nurses, but I know this applies across the healthcare platforms, they want a job that's going to be interesting and engaging with good job security and good benefits, which is healthcare professionals. Given all the attention that nursing and all healthcare professions have gotten during the pandemic, and nursing has always been voted as one of the most trusted professions, right? So Gen Z wants to know that nursing is important and needed. There's always a job to be found. As educators, we have to ensure that they know this while we're making sure that they're safe and ready to enter practice. So that's when, again, incorporating these social media platforms, YouTube videos in your teaching. It's how they best learn, digitally, quickly, technology-driven. Really try to break up your content as much as possible for them. You know, start with a video, then some lecture, then a game, hands-on simulation, virtual simulation, something with an electronic health record. Really try to break it up as much as possible. This can be difficult. This can really, you know, because we're taxed with such the burden of making sure they're ready to go into practice. But that, you know, 8-second attention span, it's tough to try to keep that learning characteristic in mind for this generation while ensuring that they're getting all the material they need to be safe practitioners. So it's trying to almost meet them in the middle with these technology-driven modalities. Research also supports, and this is really where I think a lot of this can come together, the importance of faculty mentors and preceptors for frequent feedback with these students. If we're there for them and available for them every step of the way, they know that they're being heard. They know that they're being understood. Now, again, we all know this is a generation who's emailing you in the middle of the night. And if you don't answer them by 6 in the morning, sometimes they, you know, they think that we're not here for them. We do have to set some limits, but that importance of the faculty preceptor mentorship with this generation of students really helps to ensure that their learning needs are being met. So what can we do? What are our next steps in terms of Generation Z and learning more about them? This is really just, I wanted to have this as almost like just an introduction to make us all kind of think about what we can do as educators that can further connect with this generation of learners. I mean, I have here for looking at Gen Z nursing students, but this goes across the healthcare arena, goes across all educators, right? If we understand
the 8 rights of medication administration,
how our Gen Z students learn, we need to help better connect with them, ensuring that they're ready to graduate, ready to going into practice. So we need more research. We need more research to be conducted about this ever-growing amount of Gen Z students. We need to further look at them, how we're going to connect with them and how they best learn. And again, especially with the impact of COVID, research is just starting to come out in the last 6 to 8 months about the impact of COVID on this generation of learners. And I think because we're educating future healthcare professionals, this is even more important that we really truly start to look at the impact of the pandemic on this generation of students. They've learned in ways we never thought possible due to the pandemic. Think about, you know, March of 2020, we in overnight, we transitioned all of our teachings to a virtual platform. And in some ways, while that better connects the Gen Z, I think over time now we're seeing that the negative impacts all of this virtual learning has had on this generation, particularly future healthcare professionals. they almost got a little too complacent in their learning of just turning on the computer or, you know, watching a couple of videos for some virtual activity. They've gotten a little even more hands-off, got used to that type of delivery of education. We need to really now teach them to re-engage in hands-on learning, keeping the technology in our teachings, because that's how they best learn, but not entirely 100% reliant on the technology. We need to really find the balance of all the different teaching modalities for them. We also have to keep looking at them in terms of readiness for the NCLEX exam. And I know this is nursing specific, but nursing educators, we need to ensure that these Gen Z students are ready for higher level questions, the new type of NCLEX questions that are coming, and ready to pass the NCLEX. You cannot be a nurse unless you pass this licensure exam. It's what needed for these graduates to show that they can safely enter practice. So we need to ensure that we've done everything we can for these students, that they're ready for this licensure exam, ready to enter the practice world, ready to take care of real live patients. Natalie had asked me when prior to starting, is any ideas for collaborative research based on what I've learned about Gen Z students? And I think there's a really nice bridge to not just nursing students, but maybe look at PA students, pre-med students. Is a Gen Z nursing student like the PA student, like the pre-med student? Are there, and those also I was thinking about the core experiences, those IPE core experiences that across the IHA's campus, a lot of us are involved with. Could we adapt those core experiences maybe to kind of incorporate more of these Gen Z learning characteristics? It's a challenge. It's a challenge to think about this generation of learners, and because it's quite different than how we all learned, but trying to just bring it down to the foundation of how they learn best will really help us when we're designing our curriculums and thinking about how we can best prepare them for practice. I put just my references on here as well. I'm going to just stop sharing. I wanted to see if there were some questions. A couple people just wrote about muting their mics. Just wanted to open it up if anybody has any questions.
Dr. Stinson, Stan Terlecki, that was really, really fabulous. Thank you for bringing that. Really, really great. And you got me thinking, is not the Generation Z also extremely diverse versus previous generations? You know, growing up on the internet, growing up in a diverse world, less judgmental, more tolerant. And, you know, and if so, how should we endeavor in our teaching to be aware and take this into account? You know, I still think that there must be issues related to the importance of standardized tests and GPA thresholds discriminating against certain groups and so on. How do we ensure inclusiveness in our classrooms against the backdrop of what you just described so eloquently?
Thank you. I think, Stanley, that's an excellent question. One thing, as you were saying it, one kind of spot that came out in the last couple of years, and it was from the pandemic, but I think it's actually a positive thing for this generation, was less reliance on standardized tests, right? Most of our college admissions, Seton Hall included, took out the standardized test, at least for now, or put that on hold. And I think that's actually a big positive for this generation of learners. You use the word diverse. They are an incredibly diverse. Obviously, a lot of them are even, there's more first generation college students in this generation than previous generations. There's a lot of research that coming out that supports that. So I think I looked more at just the actual learning characteristics versus, you know, the makeup, if you will, of what this generation is, but they are absolutely more diverse than any group of learners that we've seen. And I think looking at their learning characteristics will help to embrace a more continued diverse generation of learners, right? So if we really think about how they best learn, then that's going to maybe more invite more diversity into our classrooms. The one study I had mentioned about going to the high schools to gauge their interest, I think that's a big thing in terms of helping with embrace a more diverse culture, because then we can really gauge their interest and we can learn about what their concerns in getting to college and getting to that next level, right? So if we can even start our job as higher educators earlier, that will bring more attention to our diverse learners. I hope I answered the question.
Well, you certainly did. And just going back to another point you make, and I'll yield, I'm sorry to monopolize this, but I do want to tell you that I'd like to certainly visit with you and talk to you a little bit more about this in the context of how we're training and educating our medical students, and whether or not our activities, are, identified as best practice, of what other kinds of things we could be doing. So, my God, the forum is working beautifully. This is exactly what the forum is supposed to do, is bring people together. And if it's okay offline, I'd like to reach out to you to follow up.
Please, I would love that. Thank you. And this is, again, I'm grateful that we have this, because virtually in some ways, because otherwise they who would have attended and things like that. So yes, I'd love to speak to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Kristi, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm right in the middle of writing a grant about technology-driven, the need for technology, and it speaks beautifully to this. But as you were speaking, I was really thinking about what you're doing is really important, because you're really starting the ball rolling on preparing faculty to address this new student. But it really raises a question: how do we bring faculty on board? Traditionally when I taught, it was lecture, dialogue. So now there's all these technological things we could add into our curriculum. If you're talking about a faculty, a population that are predominantly in their 60s, I'm sure there's hesitancy to do all this, as well as there are biases about what we expect from students and who we expect for students. What you were talking about reminds me of a scenario. You know how tattoos are so popular now? When I was growing up, they weren't at all popular. I could remember teaching a health assessment course a couple summers ago, and this is when sleeves were just becoming popular. And I literally thought to myself, oh, this student's going to be a doozy. And I was so wrong. It was my bias. She was the best student in the class. So how do we transition from different modes of learning, different modes of teaching? I mean, what you've really talked about is really a real shift in education. So thank you.
I think it is, Kathy. And I think also, and that's one thing, I'm trying to pull out positives from the pandemic. I think one thing as educators we've learned during the pandemic is, I'll speak for myself, my own limitations in technology. When we had that sudden shift and everything had to be delivered in a different mode, we all struggled to a certain extent. So I almost feel that, and that really drove me diving into this research more, because I think it's a perfect time for faculty to examine, hey, how do I deliver this material? How am I, is this the best way to do it? Is this, not that it's the best way, is this best connecting with these students? So I think, and I know Seton Hall in general, we had weekly technology talks of, have you tried this modality? Have you tried, continuing things like that, making almost, I don't want to say making it mandatory, but making sure that all faculty are continuing to examine how they're delivering things. I think just pulling that out of the pandemic and keeping that going, it could be a start. Could be a start.
You have a phenomenal topic to research.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Beth Jameson has a question.
Hi, Kristi. I have a couple of questions that you brought up about two things: going to the high schools, and then the other is the student learning. But I'm going to talk about the high school part first, because recently had a conversation with another colleague in the School of Nursing about what are the high school counselors even telling our next generation of any healthcare provider, what entails being part of that and education wise. 'Cause I still feel like the guidance counselors or the school counselors, whatever they're termed as,
Mhm.
are not on board with how rigorous nursing curriculum is. And I think that sometimes we're getting students who are, oh, I'm a people person. Well, that's great. We need people to be people persons when they're, for communication techniques and, to develop empathy, but they're not prepared for a scientifically rigorous curriculum. And I think that we need to do, as a profession, something better or different, and getting that information across.
Beth, I agree with that. I think, and that's why I mentioned that the part specifically about meeting them, getting to them earlier, right? Getting to them when they're still in high school, because how many times have we heard, I'll say, nursing student, a pre-med student, somebody in healthcare, I want to help people. Well, that is great, but there's way more to it, right? So I think even if we can, and what you're saying makes me think maybe even connecting with high schools, connecting with their guidance departments about, here's the type of student that would best connect with the future in healthcare. Those types of things, maybe like bridging it that way could certainly help. Because think about it, their anxiety levels of this generation are through the roof as a whole. Then you layer in the pandemic, then you layer in the rigor of a healthcare curriculum. It isn't for everybody. And I think we need to ensure maybe getting to them earlier, what type of students even come into our curriculums.
Thanks. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, those are great thoughts there, Kristi, too, about the high school curriculum, is really like, we're talking about a paradigm shift and a change in teaching modalities. And this isn't just about when our nursing students come to us, is that we're getting the nursing students who have spent their first 3 semesters in the traditional regular, getting their core courses completed. And we all find that once they come to us then as second semester sophomores, it's like, bam, the curtain has come down and they're not prepared. They're not having a good understanding of the amount of work and time that's going to take to get into their studies. And I feel like they want us to spoon feed. So I saw that you had like the flipped classroom as like, one component of how we can, find engaging methods. I'm trying to take a page from, we know Mildred, our colleague, has been using this for a while, but I'm really struggling with the flipped classroom, with trying to get the students to do the pre-work they need to do. They don't want to do it. They don't do it. They come to class unprepared, and then we can't talk about case studies. And I'm wondering what can we do to motivate them to do the things. I've tried chunks, where I'll break up a lecture that I've pre-recorded and I make it into chunks. This is the pathophys, this is the A&P, and then this is the implications for health assessment. And then they don't even want to watch the 3 different components. They just want somebody to tell them what to do. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. I think basically and that was part of my struggles as I learned more about this and their learning characteristics, in that I used what I was reading and thought about the students that are in my classrooms. And to your point, they want to be told exactly what they need to know, the end game, right? They sometimes don't, one of our biggest struggles in nursing is that they don't read the textbooks. Well, that puts the burden on us as educators, knowing that that's not how they best learn. That's not how they're doing it. So how do we still make them safe? How do we, we can't just tell them what's on the exam, which is what they want us to do. So it's just, I don't know, Beth. I don't know exactly. I think we need to definitely work on that. And whether it's, starting right from day one when they hit the university of a certain type of format of how content's delivered. I don't know. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge with knowing how they best learn, know their expectations in learning, but we knowing what content we need to deliver to make them safe. There's a lot of ground in the middle between those 2 things. So we'll work on it.
The magic wand, and we pour it in their heads.
We'll work on it, Beth.
Thank you. Sue Weaver?
Thank you, Kristi. You had a great presentation and that you allowed time for questions and comments afterwards is really nice. I'm working with HMH. I really just have 2 comments with HMH nurse leaders, and they're going to be doing a study increasing the amount of hands-on in a skills lab. And we never thought, we have all these rationales, but now I can share with them. That's even more important now because of what you said. That's how Generation Z learns. So I'd be really interested in your references. So if you'd be willing
Oh, sure.
to share
I'll
that.
send them to you. Yeah.
And my other comment, I just want to make sure you and others know, one of my other jobs in addition to HMH is I work at the New Jersey Collaborating Center, the Workforce Center in New Jersey, and we track the demographics of pre-licensure students. So you can go to our website where our data reports are. We, part of legislation, we survey all nursing schools in New Jersey have to submit to us annually their data. So that will help everyone to see on our reports. It's very transparent, the changing students, and along with, we also, when nurses renew their license, we track that also. We have the workforce, but we also have the education report. So I think you in particular, maybe others on this call, would be interested in that data.
Absolutely.
I can
Thank
even
you.
put in the chat box the link to NJCCN so you can see, everybody could see it there. But thank you for your presentation. I'm so excited about what you said about hands-on. You made my day.
Well, thank you. And yes, I would be very interested in this, and I'll reach out to you as well. I'll send you my reference list.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Sherry Greenberg is next.
Hi, thank you so much. And Kristi, great presentation,
Thank you.
as always. And it's good to see everybody, of their names and pictures. So this is a great conversation that could probably go on forever. And Beth, just to address your comment, I mean, when I sense that students don't read, which is often, I'm just, the polite firmness comes out in me, and I say it's an expectation. If you are choosing to go into professional degree, then you need to start that professional role immediately. It starts now as a student, and to the other's point, actually upon admission and in high school. If this is what you want to do, then you have to get commitment, or it's not the right place for you. Not that we want to see enrollment down, but the point is that people have to make the commitment, that if this is what they want to do and these are the expectations. I think overall, I think I agree with all these the evidence base that you've presented, Kristi. I mean, it's quite clear for those teaching across programs, undergrad, even grad. Some of that age group does flow into the graduate programs, even on the online programs too, that we need to consider. Some of them are just a few years out from undergrad and come back for example, for the nurse practitioner programs here. So I'm noticing similar issues there and timeliness. And while I have X, Y, and Z, I'm like, I know, but you made a commitment, right? So some of those do move on into graduate programs. I think we also need to be mindful of ourselves, not to be selfish for a minute, but the faculty. Yes, there's a learning curve with the technology, but there are small things that we can do. And I will say that we need to be mindful for ourselves when we talk about doing interprofessional education and practice projects, across our campuses and beyond. Time, scheduling, it could take longer to do all of that back work than doing the actual IPE activity itself. So how can we make some of those a little bit easier given different schedules and programs that are graduate versus undergrad and times of classes not at the same. So being creative there in small stints. And then keeping in mind faculty, staff, budget, etc. And I'll just say one observation as a parent in a parent role. So I currently have a college freshman. So last year upon application, most of the colleges across the country require X number of essays. One university, I thought this was very creative. Instead of one of the essays, had present 5 tweets with a prompt, right? It was, something that makes something about you being unique, state 5 tweets. I'm like, how perfect is that for this generation? And, it's how can you succinctly and creatively in an innovative way show who you are in a tweet. So, you know, those are just unique. And I thought that was just unique enough to say, you know, maybe we can even consider that for, you know, like a low level assignment or engagement at the beginning, end, or middle of a class to keep people going. You know, a quick thing to throw in the chat, whether we're in person or online. So I just thought I would share that because I thought that was still quite out of the box. And that was my favorite application, I have to say. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
fantastic.
Sorry, it's fun. You say the word creative, which is often tied with innovative, right? You know, creativity.
Yeah.
Creativity is often hard in healthcare curriculums. We are tasked with delivering a very specific content. No offense to our colleagues in South Orange, but it's a little easier to be creative when you're talking about an English novel or something, you know, like there's options for creativity to connect with these learners in other professions and other majors, more so sometimes than in healthcare. So it's a challenge. It's another challenge with these learners that my manuscript I just submitted, I had a whole thing about creativity because it's hard to be creative in healthcare curriculums. It is. It doesn't lend itself to that because we have a very specific content we need to deliver. So I like the tweet thing. I might bring that into the classroom. Something about that. Create a tweet about this topic. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sherry. Is Lori still here? I know Lori had a question. She may have had to go.
Yeah, she just said she had to leave. Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. So maybe you can connect with her for the question she had in the chat.
Sure.
Okay. Sue, did you have another question? Sue Weaver? So is her hand up?
Sorry, I never took my hand down.
That's okay. Does anybody else have any additional questions? I agree, this was great. You gave me some really great new ideas for my own classroom as well. So thank you very much for that. It was a very robust discussion. And we appreciate your time and insight. I think we can all leave with a lot.
Very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you, Natalie.
Yes,
Of
thank
course,
you. And
thanks.
Stanley, I will reach out.
You bet.
Take care, everybody.
Lots of clapping and wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.